recording the meeting of the Rutland City Board of Aldermen Community and Economic Development Committee. I'd like to welcome everybody here. We have the Rutland City Planning Commission members here, and the chair, Rebecca Stevens, is here as well. And the Rutland Regional Planning Commission is going to make our presentation to us tonight. Our topics include, according to our warning, the Rutland Regional Planning Commission 2026 Regional Plan and Regional Future Land Use Map. Sound right?
Sounds perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
And we want to welcome PEG TV and viewers who are watching tonight. This is part of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission Phase 3 public engagement for the 2026 Regional Plan. So what better way to do public engagement than community access television? All right,
what we love the best about it, absolutely.
So with that, I want to welcome everybody and then turn it over to Devin to present to us, and then we can talk about whether or not we want to take action tonight on some of your scenarios.
Perfect.
For this.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for making the time. I know you're in a really busy stretch of meetings, so we appreciate you fitting us all in. For folks who are tuning in, either PEG TV, YouTube, and want to follow along, all the materials, including the maps we're reviewing tonight, can be found on our regional plan website, rutlandrpc.org/plan2026, or you can just find it through our website, rutlandrpc.org. All the materials from tonight, our Act 181 training materials, and all the other town maps are available on that website. So let's jump in. So as Chair Donahue mentioned, I'm here to announce the launch of our third and final phase of public engagement for the 2026 Regional Plan. So where have we been, where are we now, and where are we going? We've had two other phases of public engagement. As you all know, this is a significant effort, and we launched our Regional Plan update back in the middle of 2023. So this is a 3-year plan development process. And one of the things we were really keen on this time around was enhancing our public engagement efforts. So this is actually the third time that we've been before the Board of Aldermen and every other town within the within the Rutland region. By the end of this third and final phase of engagement, we will have held over 200 events and meetings for this plan. So we're really trying to put our money where our mouth is to make sure that this isn't a plan designed by just the Regional Planning Commission, but designed and informed by you all. So in our first phase, we called it Learn and Assess. That was the most broadest end of the spectrum. When we launched the plan update, we really wanted to hear as much from the general public in our towns about the priorities for the region. During that phase, we held a bunch of events, a huge public survey, and thank you all for who participated that are in this room. And that really helped inform the early draft of the phase. We took all that engagement information, we did a bunch of research, and we started drafting the first iterations of the plan, specifically the plan policies as well, which helped really guide the second phase of our engagement, which happened in 2024. And that one we called Report Back. And the goal of that phase was to say, hey, those of you who engaged, this is what we heard, and this is how that engagement informed the plan policies. So we released those draft policies, we had a survey, you all participated in that effort. That helped guide the next 6 revisions of the draft regional plan. We've been working really closely with our Board of Commissioners, which every town in the region has a representative on that board, to review those drafts, and we have a special regional plan review committee that is working all along. We have gotten to the phase now where we have a full draft that is going to be released June 1st for you all to review and the general public during the month of June. So that is one of the big reasons why I'm here. And during this phase, which we're calling alignment, the third phase is called alignment because we're really intending to bring together all the different pieces of the plan and make sure that you can see yourself and your community within this plan. And during this phase, we're asking 2 simple but really important questions. Does the plan reflect the right community and economic development priorities for the Rutland region? And do these priorities make the region a place where you want to live, work, and play? That is going to form the base of our survey, which is available now. And that survey isn't just those 2 questions. There's open-ended comment boxes for you to add as much information as you want. And if that's not enough, we have a regional plan email address. You can add additional comments. The point of this is really for you all to comment and review the first full draft. So what are we doing tonight? A couple different things. One, we're going to sort of review the plan, purpose, and design of a regional plan, the elements of a regional plan, and then get into the fun nitty-gritty on the draft regional future land use map and the draft regional future land use map for not just the region, but Rutland City specifically. And that's where we really want to make this a working group session. Come up, check out the map, offer comments, and we'll talk about that more. So, what is a regional plan? Just like your city plan, we are guided by Chapter 117 of the state code, specifically under sections 4302 and 4347. That talks specifically to the plan, purpose, and design. Just like your city master plan, our regional plan is an 8-year plan. So if we adopt this in 2026, it'll be good until 2034. And at its core, it is a plan to guide and accomplish coordinated and efficient community economic development. That's really what it's intended to do. And through that effort, we're really trying to balance all those really unique aspects: the economy, the environment, cultural, workforce, all those disparate pieces to make sure we strike that right balance. And ultimately, that balance is carried through the development, making sure that the pattern, the intensity, the design of future development meets the needs of the region, but also really balances growth and conservation. Because we know that one of the things that makes the Rutland region so spectacular and valuable is our natural resources. But we also know we need business, we need jobs, we need housing. So how do we do that? This plan is hopefully a direction and towards achieving those ultimate goals. So when we started this plan update, we said we need some core tenets to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and meeting the needs of the region. So one is we wanted the plan to be flexible so that this plan speaks to not only Rutland City with 16,000 people, but Mount Tabor with 210, and every one of the 27 towns in between. A lot of diverse needs. However, we share a lot of commonalities. So this plan is trying to be flexible enough to be applicable to all those different places and be flexible in our approach, in that it's guiding development of several different types, scales, and intensities. Also locally led. That's why I'm here tonight. We're not trying to make a plan where we're sitting at our desks, at our computer by ourselves in the dark. No, we are taking it to the streets, taking it to the towns, and making sure that you all have a voice and a hand in drafting this plan. Equitable and sustainable. We analyzed 3 elements in every single chapter in this plan. We analyzed community health, community resilience, and community equity. And the reason we did that is to understand who is this plan for, and make sure that those benefits and burdens are distributed evenly across all different types of people, classes, races, and everything, ages and sexes, and everything in between. And lastly, and most importantly for me as the executive director and planner, this plan has to be outcome driven. It has to have very clear goals, policies, and actions, and indicators of progress. So we know, are we meeting the goals of this plan? How are we measuring that progress? And how are we holding ourselves accountable? And why or why not are we meeting those goals? So this plan will have a really, really robust implementation section, and we'll be tracking that progress year over year using a regional plan report card. Are we adding jobs? Are we adding housing? Are we doing the things we intended to do? And if not, are we addressing those barriers? So, land use, right? Land use and future land use is the heart of our regional plan. And although this graphic is very simple, I think it says it all, that each of our chapters of the regional plan speak to land use and whether it's economic development, climate resilience, housing, community and facilities, it all relates back to that. And our map is really going to be one of the core features in understanding that land use. So, we have had a regional plan since 1971. We've had a regional future land use map since 1971. Every 8 years, we've updated it since then. So, Devin, what is different this time? Well, a lot is different because of Act 181. Act 181 is the first major reform to the land use planning framework in Vermont since the advent of Act 250. What Act 181 did was change 3 core things in Vermont. 1, it changed Act 250 to a location-based jurisdiction. Right now, it's about the size of development. You're either a 1-acre town or a 10-acre town.
Yep.
Now that framework still applies. However, through Act 181, there's now some opportunities for communities where we are planning future growth to seek relief from Act 250, either partially or fully. And we'll talk about those specific exemptions soon. The next thing it changes is the state designation program. Rutland is lucky enough to have a designated downtown, which historically was about guiding state level investments, specifically historic tax credits. However, that program has grown tremendously over the last several decades. And the reason it's grown is to really support redevelopment in our historic village centers. Because ultimately, the Vermont state global planning goal has always been, we want to maintain dense, historic downtowns and village centers separated by rural countryside. It's been that way forever, and it will continue to be that way. And this law continues to really reinforce that sort of core value. So that designation program reform, we went from 5 or 6 designations down to really just 2. You're either a center, a downtown or a village, or a neighborhood, the area around that center, which is a planned growth area or a village area. Lastly, and most importantly, why we're here tonight, is Act 181 changed how our regional future land use maps function and how they exist between regions in Vermont. So in the past, every region in Vermont had their own land use categories, their own visualization of those categories, and their own methodology on how they map them. Act 181 said, hey, we're going to define in statute what the land use categories are, and then we're going to ask RPCs to create a universal methodology, which is the nuts and bolts of how we actually do the mapping. GIS mapping is not a simple just cut and paste. You know, we're using many different data layers to create this map, and how we do that matters. So now, after this whole effort happens, we will have a statewide regional future land use map that a developer can come into Vermont and know exactly where they could seek Act 250 exemptions, where they should develop, where they may have trouble developing, and not have sort of inconsistency across regions. So that'll be really crucial in supporting future development in the Rutland region. So before I go on, I want to make sure that if folks have questions at any point, please interrupt me. I am here for your benefit. I've done this now 9 times. This is our 25th town we've been to, or 26. We have 1 more to go. So please, at any point, if you have questions, interrupt me. Before I go on to the land use categories, are there questions or comments, thoughts, feelings? Excitement, I can tell. Yeah.
I'm pretty engaged so far, so you're doing great, Devin. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. This is nuanced. We are not going to get into the level of detail of a 200-page statute. So, before I jump in, I want to tell you, we held a 2-day Act 181 training event. That training was recorded, and the slides are available on our website. I know Rebecca was there for one of the days. Ed was there. Those are the folks who should be there, planning commission members, to really best understand this. So if you're curious, please go online, check that out. So we'll try to get through this and try to understand how these different pieces relate to each other. So the first 4 land use categories: downtown centers, village centers, planned growth areas, and village areas. Those are our purple, pink, light pink, and magenta colors in our region. Those form the traditional growth areas within our region. Those 4 areas are the ones that will be potentially within our Tier 1A and Tier 1B categories for Act 250. Those 2 tiers are the tiers that may see relief from Act 250. Those 4 areas also contribute to our designated downtowns and village centers, our centers, and our planned growth areas in our village areas, our neighborhoods. So you can think of, in Rutland City's sake, which is probably the easiest example we have in the region, we have our dark purple downtown, and we'll look at this, your specific map in a moment, surrounded by village area, your neighborhoods. And really, downtowns is the same thing it's always been, this really mixed-use, dense development surrounded by our mixed but largely residential neighborhoods. So those are going to be designations, and they're also going to be what form our Tier 1A or 1B areas. So what is the difference between Tier 1A and 1B? Tier 1A is complete exemption from Act 250. A municipality will have to demonstrate functionally equivalent land use regulations, and they will take over existing and new Act 250 applications through your normal zoning and development process. To seek that designation as a Tier 1A town, or city in your case, you will have to apply after the first of the year to the Land Use Review Board. The LURB is the new Act 250 commission, essentially. The Natural Resource Board is now the Land Use Review Board. Tier 1B is just a step below, and that is exemptions for housing or mixed development with housing of 50 units or less on 10 acres or less. Now, the bar to reach Tier 1A is higher than Tier 1B. You have to demonstrate that you really have the municipal capacity and all the land use regulations to take on that work. So that'll be a separate effort. Tonight, we're going to be asking you to pursue, if interested, a municipal resolution that would opt in to Tier 1B. And we're asking all towns that are eligible to do so, even if you're going to seek 1A status, as a fallback in case you do not reach Tier 1A. We sincerely hope that Rutland City, if any town in the region, would be a 1A town. Yeah, Mayor Mike.
Does opting into 1B preclude us from being 1A?
No, it does not. Your 1A status will supersede the 1B. Not only that, but by the time we adopt our regional plan, which isn't until next spring in April, we're hoping that you will already know whether you're 1A or 1B, so we can just pull that right out of our application. Now, there's still a lot of unknowns around the process. A lot of this is still happening. So if you're not in Tier 1A or 1B, you fall into either 2 other tiers. You're either a Tier 2, which is basically status quo everywhere else in the region, or Tier 3, which are critical natural resources. That Tier 3 area is completely independent of this map. Tier 3 is being designed and developed by the Land Use Review Board and the Agency of Natural Resources, and that will be an overlay district. So no matter what you're categorized as in our map, the Tier 3 will be a separate process. The hearing for that rulemaking for Tier 3 is tomorrow night, and there will be several other hearings by the Land Use Review Board. So if you're interested, I can share that information with you out later. We have sent out that in email and on our Facebook, so check those opportunities out.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Makes me think about why wouldn't a community who has the ability to apply what you're asking for tonight, the Tier 1B, why wouldn't they do that?
Great question.
What is the negative consequence? I mean, there's always, well, I don't know, there isn't always a negative side, but there can be viewed a negative side.
In my mind, this is not the first time we've had this question. It's a great question. In my mind, there's 2 potential issues I could see for some towns. One, you don't have the capacity to manage those applications. You're a really small town, you don't have the administrative capacity or a professional planning department like you have here, so that'd be one reason. The other reason is maybe you want projects to go through Act 250. Maybe you want that extra level of scrutiny and not to take on the responsibility at the local level. Those are really the only two reasons. Yeah.
Right now, we have unlimited development for housing and mixed use
Yes, you
in
do.
the designated downtown. And we have up to 75 units of housing and mixed use in the NDA. So if we went to tier 1B, we would actually go backwards in terms of what we could permit, because we would be at a 50-unit threshold.
You make a great point, Ed. So what Ed is referring to is right now the state of Vermont is under the interim exemption rule.
Right.
And Rutland City, because it's a downtown, like Ed said, reaches that 75 unit status. Those interim exemptions are set to expire in 2027. So the reason why we're saying you should opt in if you want to is because those exemptions will expire and these permanent exemptions will go on indefinitely. So for tier 1A, obviously that's a much higher bar that the interim exemptions do not reach. That complete Act 250 exemption status is not part of the interim exemption. So Ed's point is like, well, if we don't get the tier 1A, which I sincerely hope you will, and I think you will, then why would we opt for tier 1B? Because we're basically giving up a potential year of, well, it would be about 6 months of that exemption status. So that is something that you really need to weigh internally. We do not know yet the process for when a municipality opts in later or opts out, what does that mean? Do we have to amend our regional plan? We do not know yet. We hope that these will be technical corrections in statute next year, because ultimately we'd really like to see the tier 1B process be disconnected to the regional plan. That way towns can opt in or out. It would not require a regional plan amendment, and we'll get into why that's important, because our adoption process is so protracted and quite extensive. So
It also means, Devin, that you wouldn't prevent you from doing the larger developments, but Act 250 would then have some jurisdiction in that process.
exactly, yeah, which certainly is prohibitive, both time and money, right? So that's a really important consideration. You're sort of trading off 6 months for permanency. Could you apply later? Probably. So I think in this case, the city will need to weigh, do you want that sort of safety net of a 1B, or do you want to throw all your eggs into that basket into 1A? No, that's a great question, and I'm happy to chat about that more after.
Just one other thing that might be pertinent or germane is, Devin, the actual district that we're looking at and expanding that district, which you're going to get into, I don't want to preempt what you're about to say, but is larger than the current one that we have under the exemption, right?
Yeah, so Act 81 allows regional planning commissions through the future land use map to create designations. But those designations are different from the ones that you have set up because you've gone through the development process and have applied to what was the downtown board, now the community investment board. So when we present new designations, it's called a step 1 designation. There's 3 steps. Step 1 is sort of the highest level, least benefit, and has the least implications. Step 2 is sort of your traditional village center level, you get some historic tax credits. That's when you have to start applying. And then step 3 is your full-on downtown designation that you have to go through the full process. So if we expand your downtown district through a step 1, it does not change your special benefits district or your step 3 downtown designation. You would have to go through the full process to get to that level. So you can sort of disconnect your designated downtown in your special benefits district from this mapped designation. Those are going to be sort of 2 levels. And really, at the end of the day, this map only matters when Act 250 is in play. Your zoning supersedes all of this for all other development. Okay, and when Act 250 is in play, it only matters when we're talking about, is it in or out of Act 250? Because then it's going to go through the 10 criteria that it always does, right? So that's important to note, is your local zoning regulations will still be applicable to the the vast majority. And if you are Tier 1A, then it will be applicable to everything. No more Act 250. So it's an important distinction. The other areas, some of which, but not all, are mapped in Rutland City, are transition area. You can think of this as sprawl reversal. This is trying to densify sort of linear corridors that are not mixed use. The best examples we have in the region are right north and south of you on Route 4 and Route 7 in Rutland Town. That's sort of auto-oriented strip development that you see in New Jersey that we're sort of trying to reverse in Vermont by densifying. So there is none of that in Rutland City. Enterprise areas, think of as your big industrial economic zones, your business parks, your quarries, your gravel pits, those areas outside of our village centers that have large employment and large industrial practices. Resource-based recreation areas are your large sort of recreation resources that have development associated with them. Ski resorts, Lake Bomazene, Lake St. Catherine. It's not just like the Lone Trail or Pine Hill Park. It has to have that development associated with it. And then finally, the rural categories. So we're going to skip over hamlets because they're just a dot on the map. It's just to signify a formerly historic settlement pattern or area. There's none in Rutland City. Rural ag and forestry, and rural conservation constitute the three rural areas, your blues, your greens, and your yellows. So first thing that we mapped was rural ag in general, rural ag and forestry. That is all properties within the current use program. It basically is saying it's a rural land use. However, the primary use of that resource or land use area is primarily for ag and forestry. However, it doesn't prohibit development. It doesn't really prohibit anything. It's just saying, hey, in this rural region, typically it's been used for ag and forestry. The next is rural conservation. And again, not prohibiting development, but these areas are areas with high priority interior forest blocks, wildlife corridors, wetlands, elevations above 2,500 feet. Historically, they've been areas that are really challenging or permanently or partially conserved lands. So federal lands, state forest lands, permanent conservation easements on private lands. These are areas that are unlikely to develop, although they could be, just due to either the land use constraints or conservation and land restrictions that way. And then lastly, rural general, and that's basically everything else. Those are the sort of rural areas, low density business and housing development. So Rutland City does have, surprisingly enough, some rural conservation, Pine Hill Park, some rural ag and forestry, some farms off of Park Street and north of town, and just a smidge of rural general sort of north off of Route 7. But the vast majority of Rutland City, which is a huge benefit to you all, and it should come as no surprise, really fall under the first four categories. Either a center or a neighborhood, which those categories, again, are related directly to the Tier 1A areas. So that is a lot. What does it mean for the region? Okay. Well, what we're proposing is 39 designated centers, 9 of which are downtowns, 30 are village centers. That's about 0.5% of the region. It's 6.5% of the buildings. The neighborhoods, we are designated 16 of them across the region, 2% of the land, 32% of the buildings. So between our centers and our neighborhoods, only 2.5% of the land, but 40% of the buildings, which tells you a lot of our growth historically has been in these dense villages and downtowns. Within our transition areas, enterprise, and resource-based rec areas, It's only about 4.5% of the land and only about 7% of the buildings. Pretty rural, pretty low density. And then rural general really is that last big bucket of our buildings. It's 17% of the land, 40% of the buildings. So between the yellow areas and the pink areas, you're looking at 80% of the buildings fall within these categories. And you can imagine the number one reason why is because that's developable land. The soils outside of areas that have municipal sewer and water are soils that are adequate for some local septic systems. And then rural ag and rural conservation, that's like 70% plus of the region, but it's only about 11% of the buildings. So think of the most rural, least dense areas. So generally, that's the makeup of the region. Where does Rutland City land in all this? Well, you kind of buck the trend, honestly, because you're such a dense city. 60% of Rutland City would be a planned growth area. Rural conservation is actually the next, mainly because of Pine Hill Park in your river sort of corridor areas. That's 20%. Rural ag and forestry is 9%. Downtowns are 4.5%. Village areas are 4%, and sort of down through the rest. So between planned growth areas, village areas, and your downtown, it's almost 70% of Rutland City, which is a huge margin. So you really stand to benefit pretty considerably from this change. So before we jump into looking at your map, I want to talk a little bit more. We're going to sort of walk back to the regional plan itself, aside from the map. So what are we asking for this time around? So in terms of the plan, we're asking everyone to review some level of the regional plan. So we understand that not everyone is going to want to read 400 pages of technical planning documents. We get that. And it's not the most accessible or equitable way to do our work. So we said, we need to think outside the box this time and make this plan a little bit more relatable and accessible. So there are 3 different levels you can review this regional plan. The first is we hired a cartoonist to create what we're calling the regional plan visualized. And this basically symbolizes in cartoon form our policies of the regional plan to give you an idea what is a regional plan and what does it mean. This sort of helps describe at a very high 30,000 foot level what it is. And if that sparks enough interest, you might want to go to the next level of review. So we did 1-page chapter summaries for every chapter in our regional plan. So you can understand the current conditions, the future trends, the goals, actions, the policies, without having to read everything. Now we're hoping, if this sparks some interest, and then the 1-page chapter summary sparks some interest, you might want to go in and read a specific chapter of the regional plan, and that's what you can do. So the plan visualized and the chapter summaries are available now on our website. Our full regional plan in layout form with all the graphics and maps will be available for June 1st. So we're asking you all to help promote this effort and provide feedback on all 3 or some of the options in which you can sort of engage with this plan over the next month and a half. So, in terms of back to the regional future land use map itself, there's 2 things we want you to do coming out of this meeting. And we're going to pull this map up right now.
Your map's upside down, Devin.
Thank you.
Throws the stuff inside.
Give me a second here. Okay. So I want everyone to come up, gather around, and take a look at this in 1 minute. By the end of tonight, we'd like you to do two things. One, sort of figure out who from the Planning Commission and the Board of Aldermen will be your sort of point person. Because we want to get in the next 3 weeks, unless you need a little bit more time, we want you to take a look at this map and give us feedback over, are we getting it right? Are there any areas in which you might want to seek any revisions to this map? Or if you're like, this looks great, we're happy with it, give us that thumbs up so we can move on and finalize the map. You might be like, Devin, why only 3 weeks? That seems like a tight turnaround. It is. We recognize that, and it's not ideal. And if you need a little more time, we will give you that time. The reason is, like I said, we started this plan in the middle of 2023. Act 181 was not created and signed into law until July 2024, well into the development of this plan. The methodology for the mapping wasn't completed until February 2025. We did not start the mapping until March of 2025, so here we are. May 2025, our plan has to go through a 6-month adoption process. We have to go through several public hearings. We have to have it reviewed by the Land Use Review Board. That means our plan has to go before a Board of Commissioners for pre-approval in September, to have hearings in January, to be able to adopt in April. So our timeline is tight, and that's why we need a quick turnaround. And give us time to make revisions and analyze, because while you might want to see substantial changes, the statute and the methodology limit how much we can change. You can't just arbitrarily say, hey, we want the whole thing to be downtown. Well, no, the statute and the methodology don't allow you to do that. And if you try, the Land Use Review Board will not approve our plan. And if it's not approved, you will not get any Act 250 benefits. So the stakes are very high, and we want to make sure you all feel good about the plan and the map early. So when we go to adopt, there's no question we're going to make it through. So in addition to getting those comments and sort of deciding who's going to aggregate those comments, I think Ed would be great at it.
We'd like you for it.
We are asking by July 1st that you make a decision about the Tier 1B opt-in, because we need to have a municipal resolution to include in our regional plan. So that's got to be done before we put the plan to our graphic designer for layout in August. Okay, so now the fun part. Let's everybody get up, take a look at the plan.
Tell me the color differences.
The color differences, there is a legend here.
Oh, there is, okay.
Dark purple, your downtown. Your lighter pinks are your planned growth area. And these very light pink is your village area.
It's your what?
Village area. So the majority of your map is planned growth area, surrounding your downtown. Rural conservation is green, rural ag and forestry is blue, and rural general is yellow. Cool. Come on, check it out.
It's online.
It is online.
Just to kind of explain it to you, that's a close-up of the dark purple that he showed. This is what our downtown is currently. This is what they're expending it to.
I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of very serious concerns with the expansion.
Yes, Mayor.
So I have two things. One,
No, you
first,
do.
Yeah, that is my number one.
Right. That's what you're going to be able to say.
We can,
Yes.
the color choice is actually defined, so we cannot change the color, unfortunately.
why are the village areas designated village areas? They're like by the hospital.
We talked about that.
On the outskirts, and then
We
there's
talked about that.
kind of the southwest side of the town.
Yeah.
What goes into that wall?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's many factors, and I can point you to our Act 181 training guide to give you the list of all the pieces that it qualifies.
Okay.
These are not planned growth area because they just didn't meet.
Thank you for
And
sharing.
I'm guessing it's because they're not
I'll let the
connected
commission
to
know.
municipal sewer and water. but I'm not certain.
What is that over there?
This?
The one you just pointed to?
This is off of Clement Road by the College of St. Joseph.
Up in the back.
It's the
Oh,
back.
in the back?
Up in the back of the hill.
Which is owned by the
Casellas.
Casella.
Yeah. So it's still within the areas.
So they still can do buildings there, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And they would still be within that active 50 exempt area. Another thing to mention here is right now we are coloring your river corridors as green. To be tier 1A, you have to adopt river corridors. If you do, those areas will then become pink because of your development style and your density. You may be able to do certain types of infill development within the river corridor. So those green strips throughout, once you adopt that, will go away.
That's interesting.
Yeah, yep.
That's huge.
And it's only infill development when there's development around it, but it is a significant. Rutland City is really probably the only one that this applies to in the region.
Okay.
Yeah, Kiana?
I have a question potentially unrelated to the map, specifically the dark purple section, if now's a good time to ask.
Yeah.
I noticed that is a dramatic expansion of the existing downtown district.
Yep.
If this expansion moves forward, what resources are going to be allocated to the Downtown Rutland Partnership that has not had
Doesn't
any...
change their district.
It doesn't change their special benefits district, correct?
And it
But-
doesn't change their downtown designation at a step 3 either. This only expands it to step 1 beyond.
What communication will be provided to business owners that are located within this district that they are not privy to the privileges provided by the special benefits district?
That's your decision as a municipality in
Okay.
coordinating with the DRP. I have spoke to Hal. He is
Okay.
aware that this is a difference between what you have and what we're proposing, and it won't impact that designation. But ultimately, I don't think many business owners are going to utilize this map in that way. This is, again, only for Act 250. So I can't imagine many downtown businesses are going to be utilizing this. They really should be using your local zoning maps. So there is some engagement to do there between the DRP.
Is there any plan for sit-down conversation with the RPC, the DRP, and the city to talk about that language and the language that we can use in the future to make sure people are on the same page? Because there are a lot of people who really heavily rely on the marketing provided by the Downtown Rutland Partnership. There's many businesses that do not fall within the special benefits district now that want those privileges. They would be included in this map.
Right.
And I just worry that there could be things miscommunicated and that could result in a lot of very upset, very angry people at us and at the DRP, even though they are not an arm of the city.
Yeah, if you ask for that, we will provide that.
I'm gonna be asking for it, so,
Yeah, I
Perfect.
think that's a great idea.
thank you.
So following up on what Kiana,
All good.
everyone in the new downtown district is still eligible for the state tax credits.
No.
They're not.
Yeah, so I will show you, if you pull up that Act 181 training guide, there's a great chart in here. Sorry, Ed, you are right. There's 3 things that step 1 is eligible for. Eligibility for the Better Places Grant Program, eligibility for downtown and village tax credits, and eligibility for priority funding for municipal plan updates. Now, that could change. That could be one of those statutory changes that happens next year. I know the program is worried about oversaturation of the downtown historic tax credit program, and they didn't get funded to their full ask this session, so.
So that follows up on.
So if you're worried about that, you
Well, because
can
there's-
say, hey, we don't want to expand our downtown. You could say, hey, we want it to be exactly the way it is. We can make that change.
Well, I think that's the discussion we had at the planning commission. Is
Yeah.
Because that's one reason, that's a con against expanding it.
Right.
But then the pro of expanding it is more
More businesses can
are
access.
eligible.
Yeah.
And so if we were going to expand it, we might actually want to ask that we expand it to match our TIF district, because there's some areas
Exactly.
where we don't hit where the TIF is that are kind of high density that we might want.
I like that idea too.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of a balancing act.
I think what you're describing, Ed, is the perfect conversation a municipality should have internally as to like weighing the pros and cons of these things. Like, do we want the benefit for more businesses? Are we worried about expanding too far? This is where you have the most control. If you want to, we're not going to make it smaller than your downtown, right? That would be silly. However, if you wanted it to grow to meet the TIF district or not, that is where we have some play in this map. You have ultimate control over the designations expansion in that program. Yeah, go ahead.
If there are areas where we want to understand the drivers behind the designation, are you referring us to the Act 181 guidebook? And will that reference the methodology that you use to evaluate the data layers? Is this like a project for A&R Atlas?
Yeah,
How
so
do we figure this out?
yeah, so the methodology is available on our VAPTA website, vapta.org. That's VAPDA.org. The methodology lays out exactly the order and operations for the mapping. That answer your question? Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to ask, what's the significance here is this being?
Green, that's what I was thinking.
That's
Green.
River corridor, that's
yeah.
and then this is like,
Wetlands.
this is agricultural forestry.
You know.
Yeah, and that
I do.
Rutland Country Club is likely not current use, so that might be a little bit too big. We'll have to look at that data later as well. This one I know for sure is current use.
Going off the Brick Road?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
buildings, that's current use, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, Rebecca?
So Devin, just to, so I can hear it again, I'm understanding that if we opt in for June 1st,
July 1st?
July 1st for Tier 1B, that potentially we forfeit 6 months of the exemption period that hopefully will qualify for 1A in January and or so around those times. If we were to get 1B and say just for some reason we don't,
Get one out.
right, we don't get to 1A, the river corridors, are they still going to turn pink or is it only at 1A?
It would be only at 1A. Well, it depends whether you adopt river corridors. or
Okay.
not. Yeah, ultimately. So if
Okay.
you do adopt them,
They're in the green.
boy, I'm trying to remember. That's a nuanced question, whether one, I'll have to look into that and let you know, Rebecca,
Okay.
on the 1B.
I would appreciate that because
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know, Ed?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
What's your question?
Oh, so I actually two comments. So one on the act, the 1A and the 1B, but then also on the downtown piece. You can, to have a designated downtown, you need a local downtown organization. That's the DRP. And the way it's written in statute is you just need to have one,
Right.
but it doesn't have to actually cover
Exactly.
the entire area of the downtown. So we can keep our special benefits district as is. If this area grows, and the DRP could still only be responsible for that downtown area. And we could still have a larger downtown, meaning that those properties would still be eligible for all the stuff.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
So that's my comment on the downtown. And then the 1A, 1B piece is, in our TIF district, we've got a couple developments right now that are probably gonna be over 50 units
Mhm.
that are being planned. If it's tier 1B, they would have to go through Act 250, whereas now they'd be exempt.
It does depend on when they would start, right?
Yeah. And so like the hotel wouldn't have been exempt if it had been
Right.
retroactive. So I know the planning commission, we are really going to work on river corridors, which is really kind of a huge thing. But,
And really, we're asking for this July 1st, but you guys are in a very special situation where you're the only one besides Pulteney and Brandon that fall into this interim exemption at such a high caliber. So really, ultimately, we need to know before we adopt, ultimately. Like, that is the time to do it. Obviously, it'd be good to know if you're sort of considering it at that July 1 mark, but if you're like, hey, ultimately, we're gonna pull this. If we don't get tier 1A, then that would be okay. You really have right up until our adoption time to make that ultimate decision.
So I think, well, our goal has always been to, on January 1st, to apply to the land use review board for tier 1A.
Yeah.
That was kind of always the path. So now we kind of have a choice in between for the next 6 months until then.
Yeah.
But like I said, with that said, I think I don't know if I would want to advocate for the tier 1B again, because some of the developments in the TIF that are right now starting to look at permitting,
Could be at
they would be caught in that Act 250.
And again, you wouldn't be under that until the plan is adopted and approved.
Wait, so what does that mean? Say that again. Sorry, we wouldn't-
So your opt-in to tier 1B is not official until our plan is approved by the LURB next April. So like if you had a project going through the process now under the interim exemption, that interim exemption is going to exist until this plan is in effect.
So if it's not adopted until April, then why don't we just apply on July 1 for Act tier 1 for tier 1A?
January 1.
January 1,
Yeah, you should. You absolutely should.
without opting.
Without this.
without going into the
Without
B.
opting now.
You are a unique, I will say, this is an approach for every other town who like isn't as clear cut on a tier 1A application. Now, if you don't get your river corridor done, then that's a different question. So let's continue this conversation, I think, is the important part.
Just, I don't want to belabor the point, but, so just, let's run the hypothetical for a second. So we don't opt into tier 1B. We do apply for tier 1A. Those short-term temporary exemptions will run out at the end of 2027, is that right?
I think so. There's a couple different dates. Some of them might be July
So
1.
if we apply,
I think
we should get our tier 1A within that year, we would hope, right?
again, the process is still being developed, so we don't know. But I have a very strong suspicion that the LURB is going to be really motivated to make those as quickly as possible. But again, the plane is being built as it's flying here.
Okay.
So,
We can talk more about it later.
yeah. I think you need to be strategic here. And I don't think you're in a position to need to force a tier 1B decision immediately. Because again, it's not until we adopt the plan that where it really matters.
Yeah.
And I think everyone, even at the state level, has mentioned like, we expect Rutland City to be tier 1B, or 1A, sorry.
Okay, one more quick question.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do tier 1B, you want us to make that decision by July 1?
Ideally, yes, because that way when we present our draft to the Land Use Review Board in September, we are giving a complete picture of what we're proposing by the time we adopt in April. Because this is our real one chance at a full review from them to say like, yeah, your plan meets statute, we're gonna approve it, or like, you got work to do and here's why.
So what I was going to suggest for the committee tonight would be that we would possibly designate one person who would take the input and provide feedback back to the committee or the Board of Aldermen in whole, which I'm going to respectfully suggest our city planner, Ed Bowe, be our contact point for that. And then two would be to just have this remaining committee. We have 2 meetings in June. So if we wanted to revisit it and pass this before July 1, we could come back to it, potentially the last meeting in June, to affect that
Yeah.
with a vote of the entire board.
Yeah, on the 1B status, on the
On the
map
1B
revisions,
status.
we do want those much sooner than July.
Say that again.
On the map revisions, ideally within the next 3 weeks, if that doesn't match up with your
I
plan.
think we've got a couple of proposals.
Okay. And imagine you guys could probably bust this out in a meeting to decide yay or nay on some of the revisions,
Yeah. So if it remains a committee, we can convene the committee again to make decisions. Clearly, there's enough information tonight to say we definitely don't want to make that designation this evening and report it to the board at the first meeting in June. But I would suggest buying us the time to do that, potentially the second meeting in June if we need to, if we've decided that's the direction we want to go in.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
agree.
Pat, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm on their website to adopt it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's on here somewhere, but I can't find it.
Go. Do you see the legislative reports tab?
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah.
And then go down. You see the methodology at the top.
The mobile version is not very user-friendly.
No. We are looking at rebuilding that website. I know.
Not to dog on your website,
Doesn't mean
Devin,
it's
I'm
good.
sorry.
I got it.
Not to dog on
They
it.
get it? Okay.
Yeah, it could be good, yes.
I have another thing. Tier 3 you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Have you seen the Tier 3 mapping
It
yet?
has not been developed.
Okay, because I was just wondering, it sounds like what you were saying is, unlike this process, they're not really gonna allow for a lot of local input, it sounds like. They're gonna just tell us where Tier 3 is. Is that
Well, they are holding a series of hearings starting tomorrow, but there will be several public hearings for that effort. But it's not like me coming to your town. You know, this is a state level board.
That's
So-
what I'm worried. It's like a public comment period, and then they bring a comment.
I can't weigh in on that speculation. I do know this, the Land Use Review Board is trying really hard to be as like collaborative and open as possible, but they also are under the gun to get many like very complicated things done. So I think they are trying. You know, I plan to be at that hearing tomorrow virtually. If folks can attend, that'd be great. And if not, you know, send email comments in on that process, because it will be important. I mean, it's written in statute that no one community can have a disproportionate amount of Tier 3. My personal opinion is like, I hope Tier 3 does not supersede what we have with our planned growth areas. You know, it should be about equal, because some of our communities like Mount Tabor, you know, it's 94% rural conservation, you know, and we'll see where it goes.
A little bit on Route 7, that's it.
So let me just, so for tier 3, just so I can understand, it's an overlay. So you could design all this with the pink and everything else, and then suddenly the tier 3 could pop on and
Yes.
take some of the pink away.
In Rutland City, I think that is extremely
But
unlikely.
it could happen.
It potentially could happen.
Okay,
Yeah. I mean, you're fully developed.
okay.
There's no natural resources in this area. Pine Hill Park's already conserved. You're not building condos in Pine Hill Park already. I don't think you have much risk here. Other communities are in a different situation.
Even if you turn your river corridors pink, could they come back and turn them green again?
Well, not according to the statute. I mean, the statute's really giving that local authority, if you have river corridor regulations, back to you. And obviously, you know, we're looking at state level river corridors as of 2028-ish through the Flood Safety Act, if they follow through that. So
Okay.
I can't speculate really, truly, as to tier 3
So,
locations
Mr.
or
Chairman,
scale.
Please.
procedure here. This has to be adopted by the planning commission and come to the board, or this is separately the board approval?
In terms of map revisions, no official action is needed because it's technically all in draft and we can't necessarily make all the revisions that you're requesting. So we're really asking for more of a preference. However, if your preference is to do this like very parliamentarian procedural process, that
I'm
is
just
up
asking
to
what the
you.
process
We
is.
really want to let you decide. You know, it does seem most of the communities we're working with are forming small working groups, submitting a few revisions here and there, you know, based on their sort of internal, like, hey, we know there's Gory here, or hey, we know this is wrong, or the preference is to grow certain areas. But yeah, I will say, generally speaking, we tried to maximize the benefit everywhere in the region whilst trying to pass that straight face test. You know, the one exception I would say would be this may be able to grow to meet that TIF boundary if you really wanted. It's not too much different now.
Yeah, there's only a couple places.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little
So-
smaller than that, but.
And just so you guys know, we did, for every single community, look at your local zoning map and your local future land use map to sort of help inform this, to say, oh, we know that Rutland City has sort of outlined these areas already.
And then how would we go about recommending to you, based on the majority of the board or the board itself, that we have the downtown district, which is the purple, mirror the TIF district.
Yeah, we'd want a written email. It's right in that packet
Oh,
to
it is, okay.
Logan Solomon
How to go
saying,
about it.
this is our sort of preference.
Okay.
We also have some towns that are marking up a map and handing us a physical map as well.
And I
We
don't think
prefer
that-
a written copy, but
Yeah.
we'll take both.
Okay. And I don't think there's too much disagreement with the entirety of the map,
Yeah.
but I think there is a wise suggestion regarding that downtown
Yeah,
piece. And
I think
again,
you guys have some stuff to
some
figure out.
consistency too with that development area.
Yeah,
So there's not now 3 versions, but, you know, you got your SPD, Special Benefit District, and you have the
Yeah.
TIF district, and it would
Yeah.
be, you know, pretty clean.
yeah.
But would that be something, for instance, that if this committee recommended to the board to approve at the first meeting in June? And then that would go then as a board action to you guys?
Yeah, if you want to play it that way, you absolutely can. Well, it's really your decision.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to turn to the city planner and see if
Yeah, we
that's,
gotta get, yeah.
if that's the,
Yeah, we can meet as a planning commission, probably what would have been our next scheduled meeting. And then would be next Wednesday night. And we can put together the map. We have maps and then we're drawing on outlines, so.
Yeah, and I'll leave this one
Then
for
they
you,
go to
Ed.
us.
What comes out of that planning, and Rebecca, you're the chair, so you stop me, but like,
Yeah.
we could meet and then have something to give back to this committee, or
Right.
committee chair.
Yeah, we can
right
do
after
that.
meeting.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, no.
if it would go back to the CAD committee, right, and then, you could do whatever you want. Yeah.
Are you mostly using the online map, would you say?
What's that?
Are you mostly using the online map to engage, or,
Because I can view it.
okay? Because some towns
Can
have
we
asked
edit it?
us,
Can we edit it on the online map?
no.
Okay.
Well, what we can do is get you this map printed with parcel lines if you want.
We have that, we've been doing that.
Okay,
And-
perfect.
We have that for the TIF.
Yeah, so, we can just give you a fresh map of the district.
Yeah.
And email to go with it.
The designations are meant to fall on partial boundaries or not necessarily?
No, not necessarily. I mean, no, not necessarily. Yeah, short answer.
That's another change we'll probably have, because on the north end of the district, like State Street, it does cut through some properties where the designated downtown doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
So that'll be.
Yeah, that's
right.
an easy, logical
Yeah, that's
change.
easy.
Yeah.
for me personally, I'd prefer a recommendation from the regional, from the city, Rutland City Planning Commission, I should say,
Mhm.
to the committee, if that's possible.
The waterways, is that a controlled environment for development, or that's totally up to us?
It is controlled unless you adopt river corridors, which would be necessary for the Tier 1A.
Some of those neighborhoods are popped in there, and some
Oh, yeah.
residential areas are popped in there.
Yep, you do have development within the river corridor.
Okay.
You
Can I point at the map?
Huh?
Can I point at
You
the
can't.
map?
If you have bylaws.
We want to put a Walmart there, but we could put
It'd be better for a Walmart than housing.
even his house or my house. We're both in the green. Mr. Bo,
Do we have time to we have time to publicly warn the meeting for next Wednesday? Okay, good.
yeah, 48 hours.
Okay, good.
Or a meeting. We're meeting 48 hours.
We're gonna call a special
Public
meeting.
meeting. I think yours is standard, right?
Not anymore. We went to once a month because the mayor asked us to. Okay, come on. Yeah. We had a fun time here. Just because it's so
Here's what it is today.
Yes. I'll put it on the agenda. Okay. With the special tax district, it's called, huh? Right, okay.
concerned about the College of St. Joseph down there.
I'll put it on the agenda, because we had the same discussion last week.
Big plans for that property.
Invite her.
You know what I'm saying?
Done much.
Yeah, that's helpful, Pat. Thank you.
Getting ready, but yeah.
Okay.
Tom, I think we're all
I
set.
think, so I think at this point, first of all, I want to thank you for
Yeah,
really
thank
an
you.
excellent presentation. We can see that you did do this 9 times and this, yeah. And really,
I'm happy to
really,
be done. This is my last one.
yeah, but
Thank you.
really, really good though.
Yeah, thank you so much
Great
for the
job.
time.
And I've sat through a lot of these over the years, so this is,
When is the next committee meetings for you?
I just want to say, I think just for the, and I was talking about for the purposes of consolidating this data as quickly as possible, if this committee has feedback on the map, try to get that to Ed before the planning commission meeting, so he can include it in their discussion, so we're not going back and forth with that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
yes. And so the one action I'd like us to take tonight would be to, as a committee anyway, and I don't think it usurps any authority from the board, would be to designate Ed as our designated hitter, if that's okay with every committee member.
Second.
Okay, all right. Any discussion about that? Ed, Sharon, you're on there? Yeah?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm here, I vote yay.
Okay, all those in favor then? Yay. All right, opposed? Motion carries, thank you, Ed. Blessing. Okay, so there's our guy.
Excellent.
He'll also coordinate with the planning commission, because we really want their feedback on this before we make any final decisions. And then we'll leave it in committee, with the options of a couple of June board meetings if we just make some decisions that we want to act on.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys have flexibility there.
Yep.
Yeah. Great.
Excellent.
Great conversation. Thank you, guys. This
Yeah,
was
I wanna
really engaging.
Thank PEG TV again for maybe the first to cover
Thank you.
the committee meeting of the Board of Aldermen.
Hopefully
And-
many more.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, and thanks for everybody who attended tonight. Really appreciate the planning commission's efforts on this and the Board of Aldermen, also visiting board members.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.